Hi, welcome to Gender Nebula Season 2, Episode 3. We've got an extra special guest today. It's the lovely Susie Green. You might know her as the CEO of Mermaids and mother to a trans daughter and all-round good egg, really. So I'd like Susie to introduce herself a little bit. And obviously, we know you from Mermaids, and there's been a lot of changes recently. So how did you get involved in Mermaids initially? What was the first kind of word you heard about them?
Well, Mermaids was the first telephone number that I found online. So
Mm,
24 years ago. I'm not allowed to talk
wow.
about my daughter's age, otherwise she tells me off. But I can be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
24 years ago. Um, actually, no, go back two more. So when she was 4 years old, um, she was assigned male at birth, first kid. I was in my mid-20s, and
Mm,
when she was 4 years old, she told me that God had made a mistake and she should have been a girl, and
mm,
kind of shocked me, but didn't at the same time. So at that point, I told her it was okay to be a boy and like girl stuff, but that didn't make her a girl. But she just kept reiterating it and saying, "This
mm,
is who I am." She kept telling me she was a girl. So when she was 6, she asked me when she could have the operation. And it was at that point that I went, right, okay, I need to do something
mm.
about this. I can't just keep telling her that she's a boy and suck it up almost. That I need
Yeah.
to do something because
Yeah.
also that constant reiteration of you're not a girl was actually making her miserable.
Yeah.
So I did a Ask Jeeves search, shows how old I am. Gosh,
That's
that's
going back a bit. Yeah.
that's going back a long time. And it was when modems did that like crackly sound,
Oh,
as you
wow.
you know, that bing bing sound.
Pre-serve.
Yeah.
Yes. And I basically typed in my son wants to be a girl,
Mm,
and Mermaids was one of the websites that came up. And
mm,
it was one of two that had a phone number, but it was the only site that actually talked about trans kids. So I called um, called and spoke to one of the founder members,
right.
and it was the first person that I spoke to who understood what I was talking about, got what I was saying, and also
Mm.
just the relief of
Yeah.
knowing
That
that,
somebody's there
yeah,
for you. Yeah.
somebody's there. And it took me a
Hmm.
while to sort of pluck up the courage. I waited until the evening when, it was quiet, nobody else was around, so I could make the call
Yeah.
without kind of feeling that, I was under scrutiny. But
Mm. I think
yeah, it
there's a
was,
yeah.
yeah,
So I
tough.
think there's a lot of misconceptions about mermaids because if you're on Twitter and but mermaids is just like a support group, really, isn't it? There's no medical side to it. You don't just prescribe anything. I just get this out of the way right now because I know people will have
Well,
they
I
do
can I
think
can
that.
give you the official line. Okay, it's an advocacy organization for gender variant and transgender youth, helping gender diverse kids, young people, and their families since
Mm.
1995.
Now,
So that I mean that's the official
now,
website definition.
so I wish when I was 6 or 7, or I can remember having those conversations with my mum, but my mum just, she said, well, go and play with your sister. That was how she dealt. Because I'm the youngest of 7, and so that would have been different for me. But I think if I'd have had that, something like mermaids, I mean, mum could have found out something for me. Because like obviously at school, schools are terrible, especially when I was at school. Um, so I think it's really good work what mermaids do. Uh, and like I'm saying this because I know people have all these preconceptions about it. Because obviously the first time I heard about mermaids was because of the negativity, because of like certain vexatious people that believe these conspiracy theories.
So
So
I think we should just point out that Susie is no longer the CEO of Mermaid.
yeah,
She's the former CEO of Mermaid. She
right.
currently works for GenderGP. So I just want to make sure that is everybody's aware of that.
Yeah, early in 2023. So there was a couple of months in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we should just go through some of the kind of the major events that happened while you were at Mermaids. Some of them were, I guess the word is difficult or controversial, but I'll let you kind of talk us through it. So the first thing I've got on my list here is 2017. Mermaids reported that its volunteers have been victims of online harassment. So I know later on as well, there was a lot of harassment going on of your volunteers, but I didn't realize was this was going on way back in 2017 as well.
I mean, you've got to remember that like Mermaids has been in existence since 1995. I didn't start Mermaids. Mermaids was already there as an organization. It was a very small parent support group.
Yeah.
When I joined as a parent, then I became a trustee, then I became chair, and at the beginning of 2016, I became like the first member of staff as the CEO. Up until that point, it was an entirely voluntary organization. But I think one of the reasons that we made the step change to having paid staff was because of the volume of calls, emails, etc. was coming in. And I put in some tech in sort of 2013, where I looked at how many calls we were answering. Now, bearing in mind that I made my first phone call like 24 years ago and got through straight away, when I then found out in sort of 2013, 14, that we were only answering 7% of calls because of the numbers coming through and the fact that we didn't have like, it was all the trustees who were all parents of trans kids doing the work in and around families, kids, work itself, you know. So, you know, I do a couple of nights a week. One of the other, the founder member that I spoke to, she'd do a few hours during the day. And we did sort of bits around what we could. And actually what we realized when I put that tech in to actually see what was happening is how many people we were failing, that were desperate to talk to us. And I remembered what it felt like as, you know, a parent plucking up that courage to pick up the phone and talk to somebody about what was happening and how could I help my kid. If I'd have just not got through to somebody, or I don't know whether I would have tried again. I mean, I don't know what would history be like. I'm sure I would have eventually managed to make contact, but you know, 7% of calls being answered is pretty poor. And so I went to the board at the time and said, I think we need to consider either saying we can't do this because the volume is too high, and not saying that we're providing this service because we clearly weren't, or we step up. So we look at changing the organization, get funding, look to get corporate funding, look to try to engage more with service users and get donations in, and actually put ourselves into a position where we had paid staff members. We could then do things like training volunteers, that kind of thing, to be supported by staff members and things. So I was the first member of staff at the beginning of 2016, and I think we had enough money in the bank to pay me for about 4 months. And I left my job of 15 years at Leeds Citizens Advice Bureau to sort of take a leap of faith to doing it. And yeah, I'm obviously very, very glad I did. And Mermaids is, you know, sort of has gone from strength to strength and is now supporting literally thousands of families and young people every year, and is hugely, you know, important to so many of those people. But
I was just trying to think before
2007, before 2017, you know, we weren't really, people didn't know about us.
Yeah, and you're quite unique. You're like the only people doing it. It's like that's one of the issues, I think.
That's a good point. There's not many
because you become the focus of everything when you're the only person doing something. So it's not I don't know, maybe I just don't know. Maybe there are other smaller groups and other that we're not aware of, but you tend to find that these people don't want to broadcast. They want to keep their families private. It's not something they want to go into the media and talk about, because when they do, they tend to get played, don't they? I mean, I'm sure you've had phone calls to go on TV shows, be on investigative journalists things and things like that. But I think, like with my experience of the media, it's kind of like it's a Faustian pact, isn't it? You've got to be really careful what you agree to. So.
Yeah. And I think the first negative media attack against us was in 2017. Victoria, you mentioned that, and I just remember it's obviously nothing like that ever happened to us before, and we were open about, you know, I was part of the 2016 stakeholder group that looked at the service specification for the Tavistock, which is a gender identity service for children and young people, and So, we were engaged. We we talked to the Tavistock on behalf of our service users. We represented them with regards to issues that they were, experiencing. We, we were supporting thousands of people by this point.
Yeah. Was there a massive increase in the number of people who were coming to the charity?
Yeah.
It was a big
increase. We saw it just go up and up. And you sometimes wonder, did it go up and up because we actually put more resource into it as we got, as I managed to secure some grants to get some additional staffing that then meant we could train up volunteers. So was it because people then started to find out about us? But then I think the thing that really drove people to us was the very thing that, like the press attacks. So the first press attack was in 2017.
Yeah.
And immediately following each of the attacks against us, we saw our service user base grow.
Yeah.
Because people might not have known, because they became aware. And so because we were the only ones that they were going after.
So there's kind of a more awareness to everybody, and I think that's probably what drove the numbers, in my opinion.
Yeah,
mine too.
And then in 2018, there was that amazing butterfly series that you did with ITV.
Yeah,
that was really good. I watched that at the time, and that was pretty much around the time when I was coming out. So it really helped me, and I know other people who have, spoken about it and how much it helped them, because it was, Anna Friel is one of my favorite actresses, and she was really good in that series, and it was such a touching kind of story, and I saw lots of myself in it. It was really kind of helpful for me.
I'll have to see that. I must admit, I've not seen it.
Yeah, you should need to watch that, Frida. It's really good.
The only thing I know about Anna Friel, really, she did the first ever lesbian kiss.
She's been in loads of things.
And she was in do you remember Brookside?
Yeah.
She did that famous lesbian kiss, because sometimes you'll see lesbians at Pride with that photo of the two girls, and it's still an iconic image.
But the interesting thing is that the TV show, the program was actually based on mermaids, wasn't it?
Yeah, it kind of followed. They didn't encapsulate just one story, as it were, but they did use mermaids. Mermaids were the support group in the actual film. It's in the series itself.
Yeah,
and they based quite a lot of the story on sort of what happened to me with my daughter. So there were quite a lot of similes, but I think they spoke to quite a few parents, and I organized like focus groups with families and young people, and the cast came along as well, which was really nice. So they came along and they met parents and families and stuff, and Anna was just on it, in terms of, I want to get this right. So she was
great.
We need more things like this. It's like I always refer people to. I don't know if you saw the Voice Kids. There's a young girl on called Darcy, and she had an amazing voice, and her parents support obviously a trans girl, and they support. And it was just that moment, those little things and programs like that. They can change people's perceptions, and that's what frightens the people that hate mermaids. They hate it because they don't want any positivity, so they have to keep recycling the same tropes about mutilation, about harming children, and it's a very powerful trope because it gets people's kind of primal, it's really nasty, and it's like a snowball. So when positive things like this come on telly, you always see them ramping up the attack. So I want to see more
and
stuff.
There's a new one coming out. So Paris Lees has done a BBC.
Well, did you see all the hate? Did you see all the hate Paris Lees?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh my God, she's not the kind of person that's going to stand for that. And another thing about that is, like, I noticed recently that TV and dramas. I mean, there's one called Doctors that's on in the afternoon. It's not a very popular. Well, it's popular, but it's not a very well publicized sort. But they have got a transgender storyline at the moment. So I've been following that, and that's really well written. And I wondered if you had something to do with it, because no,
I don't think so. I mean, if it's an adult trans story, I don't know if it's a child or
it's
a
kind of
person.
It's like a school age, sort of college age.
Okay.
Not heard of that one.
They do. I mean, we have had, like Emmerdale. We get calls, we get asked to look things over. I remember Casualty came to us a couple of times and asked us to look over scripts and stuff. So we will, we will.
It's really good that they do
work.
that.
Yeah.
because that show, Vicky Doctors. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they've had
Well,
a
I'm
couple
normally
of,
at work, Frida, so yeah, I was
well, no, I am, but it's on it's on the iPlayer.
daytime
So
television.
it's really good. And they did have a storyline where there was a dispute between a father and a mother, and the father didn't want the child to transition, and the story was about that legal battle. And it was really well written. Honestly, I recommend it. And that's why I thought Susie might have been part of it. So,
Yeah,
but never
I'm
mind.
just
Not that
curious.
one. I mean, like massively involved with Butterfly,
Yeah.
hugely involved with Butterfly. And, we had, so like Jake and Hannah Graff were in the actual series as well. They played people that was in the support group, when in one of the meetings and things. And all of the kids in the filming, when you look back at Butterfly, if you look at the one where they have all the kids in the trans support group, they're all Mermaids kids.
Right.
None of them were actors. They were all
Wow.
actual families and young people.
So that's like a window on mermaids that
I
people.
didn't realize that the graphs were in it. I'm going to have to watch it again now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it full stop. Is it still on the?
It should. I mean, it should still be on. It's probably. I don't know if it's still on.
It might be on. It'll be on some
probably
streaming
on.
service.
It'll be on somewhere.
We highly recommend it anyway. So
I'm just wondering if that series also helped to kind of boost the numbers that were coming to.
Yeah, of course it would have. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every
I'm
time,
sure.
obviously, there was a lot of positive publicity around it at the time.
Yeah, I remember vividly. I remember vividly the first time I saw a trans person on telly. It was a documentary about Julia Grant, and I don't know if you remember Julia Grant, but I worked for her briefly when she had a cafe in Manchester. But she was like the first documentary about transition that was on telly, and obviously it came out before I was, but they repeated it, and I got in touch with her, and she spoke to me on the phone, and she sent me a copy of her book, and that was my first, and that's how I was able to talk to my mum about how I felt, because when you see something on telly like that, it's oh my God, it's like a light bulb kind of thing. So yeah, it's really important that the TV producers understand that, because you're not just making drama, you're not just making fiction. This is real life,
Let's talk about the big lottery.
Okay.
Oh yes.
So, I think it was 2018-ish, somewhere around there. You were getting a huge amount of money from them. I think it was 500,000 in funding.
Over 5 years. So it was 100,000 a year. 100,000 a year over 5 years. So
wow.
I started applying in April of 2018. Spoke to the grant manager. We went through, you go through so much in terms of like protocol, due diligence, all of that. So by the time we got to the beginning of December, and I was told at the beginning of December, I think like 5th or 6th, that we'd got through, that we'd got the money. And the team was still quite small then. There were only, I think, about 7 of us. And it was just this I don't know, this huge relief that we were getting this support to be able to expand our training, which increased our trading, which means that obviously brought additional income into the organization. It gave us paid for 3 trainers and service facilitator salaries. So it added to the resource for us to support people as well. So we were like ecstatic. Oh, and it paid for a researcher as well.
I mean, so 100 grand at that time was probably, a huge chunk
still
of
is
annual budget. I mean, what other kind of, sources of funding did Mermaids have at that time?
So we had a Children in Need grant as well. We had some smaller grants like Garfield Weston. I can't remember whether Henry Smith were funding us back then, but they were fairly quickly afterwards. Paul Hamlin Foundation as well, one of the first funders that supported us. So there was quite a lot in terms of, different small streams of money. We also got a reasonable amount of money in individual donations. So from, people go on our website and they donate, and the best donations, as always, are the ones that are recurring donations, so that you can actually plan and see how much money you're going to get in, so that you can use that and planning and budgeting.
I've actually donated myself and to Vicky. I'll tell you about the circumstances of that later, but I have donated myself.
I had to twist her arm with one. We'll talk about that in a bit. So this funding was put under review, wasn't it? Because the charity came under a lot of anti-trans activist criticism.
Well, what happened was we got news of the actual grant being made, and then it's announced, so they put it up on the lottery website.
Yeah.
And Graham Linehan, writer, Father Ted, and all-round sort of hater of trans people in general,
Yes.
went on Mumsnet, which I call Prosecco Stormfront. That's not my line. Somebody else gave me that, and I've stolen it. But basically went on Mumsnet and told everybody on Mumsnet, put like literally the CEO of the lottery's email address, and said everybody must complain. Mermaids cannot get this money. Oh my God, they're gonna. I mean, I think he said something like they're going to open a clinic and trans more kids. I mean, you know, Mermaids did not get involved in medical pathways. We would tell people what was available, but we don't, you know. But
just to support a charity at the end of the day.
Yeah, any assemblage of credibility Graham Linehan and Mayer have had in the past has now evaporated, because even his best friends, like, you see that he's always writing. If you see him on YouTube going, "I wrote to this person, they didn't reply back." It's like, yeah, because they don't take you seriously, Graham. It's so sad, you know. Because I tried to reach out to him at one point, say, "Graham, you know, you're going to damage yourself. This is self-harm," and it just made him double down. So
I think I honestly think he's poorly. He seriously needs some help. But regardless of what he then kicked off was hundreds of emails to the lottery CEO saying, "Don't give this money to mermaids." He also then what we then had was a headline by the Times saying, so it had been leaked to the Times, I think, just as the money was given to, they were saying that they were going to announce it. So the Times, Andrew Gilligan of the Times did a headline: "Child sex change charity gets £500,000 of public money." Yeah.
It's awful.
So that kicked off. Graham Linehan went to Mumsnet and galvanized the troops to send in nasty emails about mermaids. At the same time, our supporters were obviously emailing in as well and going, "What are you doing?" But essentially, I got a phone call. I was walking my dogs, 17th of December it was. I was walking my dogs, and I got a phone call from the grant manager saying, "I'm really sorry, but we're just going to have to suspend your grant." And I was like, "You did all the due diligence. You know all of this. And we've been attacked in the press before." And they were just like, "No, we're sorry." You know, and when they sort of talked to us later, you know, they said that they get, like, I don't know, an email or two a month saying, you know, "We don't want that hostel building anywhere near my back garden." You know, but literally they had hundreds.
It was a pile.
They said both for and against, you know, so they were like, "Yeah, we can't just ignore this because of the volume of the I just don't think they were prepared for it. They didn't know what to do.
So yeah, but too hot to handle for them, obviously. Yeah.
Just before Christmas.
Did you have to get lawyers involved?
We did, yeah. We had some support from some legal experts around what was going on, because it's obviously such a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But also because again, it was just a load of nonsense. You know, child sex change charity.
I mean, yeah. I mean, even I mean, it's none of their business at the end of the day, because they try to make out they're doing something to protect children, but there's nothing in their words that does that, and it actually harms people. So what the front is always, "Oh, we've got to protect the children," but that is always the front of the right wing. That is always the front that we've got to protect the family, we've got to protect the status quo, we've got to protect the children, is a common trope among very authoritarian and puritanical power structures. And unfortunately,
it's the playbook of 30 years ago when they were trying to roll back gay rights.
Yeah, well, we've seen it happening. We see it happening right now.
Same headlines. You just like literally take out gay and put in trans, and I mean, like, literally to the point where the headlines are pretty much identical. So
they're just, I mean, there are certain groups of people, like lobby groups. If there's a subject in politics, like say they're gonna something about fox hunting, they'll run a load of stories about why foxes are going to bite your children, and those stories are paid for by Westminster-based lobby groups and think tanks, because they want people to be frightened of something. So whenever a vote comes up about climate change or anything like that, they get to work on climate skeptics. It's always the same people. I'm sure you know who they are. I'm not going to mention any names, but if I mentioned the Policy Exchange, you might know who I mean. But yeah, it's always the same people.
Yeah,
And they don't. And it's like it's amazing how mad this makes people. It's amazing how angry people get. But I think it becomes
And the thing is, it's not their kids.
I know.
It's none of their business.
But
they're talking about other people's children. And what they're saying is they know better than those parents of those children.
Yeah, and they assume
which is
that
ludicrous.
And it's
ludicrous.
It's this assumption that the parents are harming their own children. I mean, I'm sure there are cases in the world. If you look deep enough, you would find cases of parents who are not doing the best for their children. But if you're looking in a trans direction, you're sort of looking the wrong way, aren't you? You're actually you're ignoring a real problem in society. And so when you're focusing on the trans thing all the time, if all your news is centered around that, your eyes are off the real things that are going wrong. And the press and the politicians love that, because what they love more than anything is a public looking the wrong way. So
diversion politics.
13 years of failure, and and it's misogyny in society as well that causes it. Because like on Talk TV today, you've got the story about the bullying of I don't know the details exactly, but it turns out there was a young girl and she was expressing gender, and then two girls decide, oh, you're mentally ill. And then the story becomes not about bullying, but about that teacher. And as far as I can see, that teacher did the right thing. She intervened and said, look, girls, you don't do that to another human being. That's all that happened. But the press it's all about woke schools turning your kids trans. So that's where we're at,
Just getting back to the lottery story.
Yeah. That's me going off on a tangent there. So.
Yeah, she does that now again. So, come the beginning of 2019, we have this YouTuber who says they're going to do a Donkey Kong 64 continuous streaming on YouTube. And I think it was a guy called Harris Brewis. I'm not sure what the handle is on YouTube, but it's
Hbomberguy. And he didn't tell us. We didn't know.
He didn't tell you? Okay.
He didn't tell us. We didn't know. He just decided he was going to do it. He did this amazing video as well. So if you look up Hbomberguy and you look at his back catalogue, he did this absolutely amazing
video. He was going to play the game end to end, wasn't he? 100%.
And he was like, I'm going to be Donkey Kong, and I'm just going to. So he did it on a Discord server and Twitch.
Yeah.
So he basically ran the stream and said, I'll keep going until I beat Donkey Kong. And in the meantime, you can donate.
Or something he was playing continuously.
Yeah. And
but the amazing thing though was the live stream had some amazing, notable guests popped up, such as Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Chelsea Manning, Paris Lees, Owen Jones, Natalie Wynn, Abigail Thorne, your good self, Colin Mockery, and even Cher popped up on the.
That's amazing.
I mean, can you imagine that? I think, how much did he raise? I think, was it over 2.5? Well, over 200.
What he said was he thought he was going to raise about 3 or 4 grand.
Yeah, and that was his aim, wasn't it, to get about 5?
Yeah, about 3 or 4 grand. And my one of my friends, she's on Twitter as Haley Welly. She called me sort of like Friday evening and was like, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "No." She went, "Go and have a look. You need to have a look at it." So I went online and had a look, and I think it was already about 5 grand.
Was it on Twitch?
Yeah, Twitch.
Yeah.
So it was streaming. So I was like, "Oh, this is great." And then we made contact through sort of to the people who were sort of doing the management of the stream, like his little team in the background sort of thing. And it just blew up. It just blew up. And
it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, AOC, I mean, wow. I was so fangirling.
Could you imagine Graham Linehan doing something like that? I mean, it's like, it just shows you that the level of support there is for you. And I mean, it must feel all the time like sometimes it's so negative and you've had to deal with so much shit, But just reading that, it must make you feel like it's all worthwhile, you know.
Well, it backfired spectacularly what Linehan was trying to do, wasn't it? I mean, he's trying to stop you getting your 500,000. You got that anyway, and you got this extra.
So February, the lottery did loads and loads that they were reviewing all of our policies, processes, they were talking to our staff, they talked to the helpline volunteers. You know, they went through everything to sort of say, what do you do and what do you not do, and what do you talk about and what do you not talk about, and all of this. So they went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. I don't know how many meetings I had with a guy who was running the investigation. He was lovely, you know, just he was head of the Scottish branch, so they brought him in to do like the investigation because he wasn't anything to do with the original grant. So we got a clean bill of health sort of halfway through, well, towards the end of February 2019. But in the meantime, Harry and as Hbomberguy raised like, I think it was like 240,000 for us. I remember watching on the stream, and when he got to like 97,000, he actually broke down. He'd like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. But the thing is,
he wasn't even halfway at that point.
No.
I think it's on YouTube.
Beautiful. The thing is,
amazing response.
We just were pushing it out to all the parents and the young people, and we were like, okay, so you see all the hate all day, every day, these very loud voices of people who constantly go on about trans kids, go on about parents of trans kids, you know, invalidate trans women, invalidate trans kids. Go and have a look at this stream. And what you will see was literally thousands and thousands and thousands of messages of support. It was gorgeous. I mean, I stayed up all night watching it, and popped in onto the stream a couple of times and spoke to Harry. And
I'm not sure if he's done anything since, but that was an amazing thing that he did that.
I mean, this is one of the main motivations for doing this podcast, is like to talk to people, you know, and put positive messages out, because we have to do. I mean, when we do the podcast, just me and Vicky, we tend to laugh at the news, and sometimes it's kind of like, it can
get a bit depressing when we go through.
It can, you know, because we have to cover EHRC, we have to cover parliamentary debates, and it's like, God, it's so nice to talk to real people that are actually involved in a real progressive change.
Yeah,
and it was the nicest thing.
It was amazing. The response was incredible. Let's move on to something that was not so positive. This was I think it was June time frame in 2021, where yourselves, Mermaids, and other charities, including Stonewall, began raising funds to appeal the awarding of charitable status to LGBT Alliance, describing the group's activities as, you know, degenerating trans people. So could you just talk a little bit around what was going on with that, you know, LGBT Alliance? And I think they tried to do something to Mermaids as well. I don't remember exactly what it was now.
To be honest, the LGBA just constantly went after Mermaids, constantly went after me. You know, the sort of discourse that was on Twitter, social media, etc., the sort of things that they were saying about what we were as a charity, talking about us transing, basically, you know, making kids be trans because you're a homophobe and don't want a gay kid.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that
total rubbish. Yeah.
I know. So as if.
I mean,
so this was going on for a long time. They started up, and we immediately started to see this stuff. So, you know, and they managed to get stories in the papers and things, because, you know, the papers ate up anything that was anti-trans that they can put like a controversial spin to.
Well, they're very well connected, aren't they? So
yeah. So we saw all of this, and then they applied to be a charity. And we were like, no, they're never going to get charitable status.
I mean, they don't do any charitable work. They do no charitable work at all.
No charitable work.
So has that been resolved? I don't think it's been resolved yet, has it, that case?
So the court case itself was sort of like towards, I think, like the last hearing I went to was just at the very, very beginning of November, which is the last couple of days. And so the judgment, we're waiting for the judgment to be handed down by the courts, by the judges, as to whether or not they will. So it was Mermaids with Good Law Project funding, taking the Charity Commission to court for giving LGBA status, charitable status. So we didn't
they really
sue
came for you
LGBA, you know. So we didn't sue the LGBA. We sued the Charity Commission for giving them charitable status.
Right.
And like, lots of evidence was given, and honestly, I was in the courtroom and they just tried to use it as a speaking point about the things that they did, rather than the problems that they had with organizations such as Mermaids and Stonewall, etc., without actually talking to the points that we raised, which were, you're not a charity, you don't do any charitable stuff, you shouldn't be given. And the only things you do are based around degenerating others.
So there's no charitable actions going on at all.
I mean, even within that category of LGB, they don't actually do, because I volunteer for the LGBT Foundation. They work with the homeless people, they work with drug and alcohol rehabilitation, we work in, you know, counseling services and signposting to. Well, I've never seen LGB do anything for the lesbian, gay, or bisexual community.
I can't think of anything that they've done.
I've had a shit disco once or twice in London. I think that's what they've done.
Yeah, they have an annual conference and invite a few dinosaurs. I think that's all they do.
Yeah. Well, that was that. But you see, you know, because there's such. I mean, they're so easy to catch out. You know, when they're trying to be, they try and be moral. They have the moral high ground. But all you have to do, it's very simple. All you have to do is comment and then wait for their followers to reply to you, and that proves that they're not followed by anybody that cares about anything apart from hate. So another experiment that I like to do is, sometimes people say, is J.K. Rowling transphobic? I say, I'll tell you what, follow the hashtag I stand with J.K. Rowling and come back to me.
So I think around this time, you know, when this kind of case was going on, we started to see, like, in quick succession, you know, negative things in the press about mermaids. All of a sudden, I don't know where it came from, but there was a story in the Daily Telegraph about chest binders. I'll let you talk about that if you want. And then there was also another story about Jacob Burslow and the London School of Economics.
Yeah.
You know, so do you want to talk about those two topics?
Yeah. So basically, the Telegraph started going after us on the 23rd of September 2022. So I was actually on holiday and started getting notifications from people who were like, okay, so the Telegraph are going to write a piece. They generally write to you first, tell you what, give you a little bit of an overview and say, would you like to respond?
Right.
So I was dealing that with whilst I was away on holiday. Then the pieces started to appear, and you know, they basically had a young person phone up and pretend to be trans to try and get a chest binder. And I mean, like, chest binders are not prohibited wear. You can buy them off Amazon. You literally can buy them off Amazon.
Yeah. What I would say is that if you're buying something that's specifically made for that purpose, well, it's going to be it's a safe thing to buy. You know, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, if they're coming to you, it's because they trust you. You know, it'd be better to come to you.
We didn't sell them. We provided them free of charge. So like Spectrum and GTB, they used to like donate binders to us.
Yeah.
And we would then speak to, and it was mainly the parents that we supplied binders to. So low income families, they couldn't afford to buy a couple of binders for their kids, or they just weren't sure about what best to do.
I mean,
so they'd come to us, and we would
think about the alternative to buying a proper binder. You know, it's doing something homemade yourself. So what's better to do that?
You know, we've heard of kids literally ripping out their armpit hair because they literally wound duct tape around themselves. Their damage done. You know, to their skin, and also too tight, not, you know, the restrictions, the problems. I mean, it just doesn't bear thinking about. So it was really sort of on a harm reduction basis. And also, let's be really clear, young people who wear chest binders do so because it gives them more confidence when they've got them on.
And it's also this dichotomy in the trans argument. I always say, you know, as far as transphobes are concerned, if you're under 16, you're a victim of your parents, and if you're over 16, or you just, you know, we just hate you anyway because you're trans. So where is that line? They suddenly stop caring about you when you're 16. The fake concern stops when you hit 17, does it? Because no, the thing they hate, the thing they can't stand, is the fact that people are free to express themselves, and that's powerful. And if you want to help, and because you're there to help with that, and to reduce harm, They can't see it any other way. They in their minds, they can only see it as a pure innocent child that had been forced to do this thing, which obviously is obviously the opposite of the case. Because, you know, by the time somebody goes to a gender service or anything like that, they've probably been talking to their parents about it, as your daughter was, for many years. So, you know, it's all made up nonsense, isn't it?
And also, it's not their bloody business.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's none of their business.
You know,
Whether,
it's
you
just
know,
another.
this is not their kid. This is
Yeah.
not their business. It doesn't make any difference to them whatsoever. You know, there are much bigger issues out there that they could really focus on that would make a difference to.
But
You
it
know, let's talk
feels
about
like,
male violence. Let's talk about domestic
Yeah.
violence. Let's talk about, you know, the fact
Yeah.
that they're using trans issues as wedge issues. Let's talk about reproductive rights and body autonomy. But they're not.
Well,
You
it's
know,
like
you know, this when this story came out, you know, from the Daily Telegraph, it just felt like here's another story attacking mermaids for the sake of attacking mermaids. It seemed to be,
yeah,
it felt like a very kind of organized attack, because straight after
can I
that,
just point something out as well? 2 years prior to that, in 2020, I can't even remember who it was. It'll be the Mail, the Times, or the Telegraph.
one of those.
2 years before, not an exact duplicate, but the exact same story came out. Mermaids are supplying chest binders to children. Oh my goodness, save the kids, whatever.
Yeah.
And we went through all of this with the Charity Commission at the time, 2 years before. So we went through what our policies are, what our protections are, what our safeguarding process is, how we work through a process and procedure for young people if they are applying for themselves, but mostly it was parents. And what we send out in terms of safe binding, the guidance around how long to wear it for, you know, all of those things, not to wear it when you're doing like physical activity, etc. So the Charity Commission had already looked through everything that we did and do, and how we protected young people in the best way that we could do, whilst also maintaining it's for harm reduction. It's to stop them binding with bloody duct tape, for God's sake. But, you know, we did all of that, and the Charity Commission gave us a clean bill of health. So the Telegraph kicked off again, and it only was made worse because they managed to get an ex-member of Scotland Yard to say that they considered it was the same as female genital mutilation. And that hit the headline. It was like, oh my goodness, it could even be illegal. And the Met Office, the Met Police went, don't be ridiculous. Of course it's not.
Yeah.
But they got their headlines.
Yeah, but they don't care about the truth. But was this a very specific journalist or somebody that is still writing now?
I think it was just, let's what can we use against mermaids? Okay, let's use that again. I mean, it felt like that kind of story to me.
Well, they did it. They did a sting. So they literally got a young person to pretend to be a trans person to try and get a binder. And do you know the funny thing is? They never got a binder because they raised a red flag because they wanted it sent to a friend's house, not their own. Right. And we always look at that in terms of, okay, so if they're that afraid of their parents finding out,
exactly,
we have a responsibility to, you know, be safeguarding that young person.
You
know, if they're going to get that binder and it's then going to open them up to harm from their parents, then we've got a responsibility around that as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are a group of journalists. I'm not going to mention any names, obviously, but I have monitored because I monitor the media quite a lot, and they'll go out and find people who want to sue. Or they'll find somebody that they think can be have a face in the paper, not necessarily to do with mermaids. This could be to do with anything to do with you know, teachers that have been kind of disciplined for saying you can't, you know, you're not agreeing with the policy on trans issues, and they go for these people, and they're funded by sometimes the speech union, Toby Young's Free Speech Union, and they create these stories. There was no story. But because they're willing to throw money at somebody, they'll create the story, and the story is just the fact that they can manufacture a story is what is the motivation for that, and obviously the motivation is some kind of authoritarian idea of identity, and I think that's why
this clickbait, you know, trans
it makes a lot of money.
Stories make some money in terms of advertising.
Yeah, the money side.
As well as that, Victoria, you mentioned Jacob Breslow.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jacob Breslow had come on board as a trustee at the end of July. And then they started going after us in September. So what we knew that there was a lot of digging going on into staff, into volunteers, etc. We also were aware that there were stories all over the dark web. So Kiwi Farms had lots of stories of, lots of things being written about members of staff, me. They put pictures of my house and like my address online, and pictures of my dog and my kids and the kid's dad. And, there was so much speculation about we're doing this, we're doing that, and whatever. And whilst these Telegraph pieces were coming out, so we had to, obviously, if you get a load of negative press, you have to report it to the Charity Commission. So I raised what's called a serious incident report with the Charity Commission to say, we're getting a load of negative press. This is what it's all about. We've obviously dealt with the binders with you before, but this has become extra nasty because of this FGM, simile that they created. But we told them about it. Then what happened is the story about Jacob broke. So Jacob contacted us and said, this happened a long time ago that he went to this conference, and he since found out that the people he went to the conference for were like paedophile apologists. Apparently, that's that you can't say it any. Anyways, they talk about having, really minority attracted adults, and I'm like, that is just grim. And
they're trying to associate you with that.
So as soon as we knew, and as soon as we saw the stuff, and Jacob resigned immediately, and he went, I don't want to, but I was cross, because we asked explicitly people, have you got anything that could damage the charity? And I'm pretty sure he knew that could have been used against us, and he didn't tell us.
Things like that.
I mean, I can only hypothesize.
Things like that going to a conference wouldn't come up in a background check anyway, would it? I mean,
no. I mean, we do. All of our trustees, all of our staff, all of our volunteers have enhanced DBSs.
Yeah. So the way I look at this is, as soon as you find out about something like that, you take action, and that's exactly what you did. So
we did totally talk to him straight away. He literally said, "I'll resign" straight away, and we were like, "Yeah, you should."
It's like the same thing with the Tavistock and things like that. They were so desperate to find people to sue them, and they didn't find that. And they found, I mean, there were lots of failings there. Let's not beat around the bush, but they were mainly down to funding. And, like you said, there's a massive increase in demand. I think that was not helping. And obviously you have all this vexation going on in the background. But there was never, as far as I'm aware, there's never been a whistleblower who said there was something wrong with the treatment or care of children. There's never been any realistic complaint from any parent and if there had been, we'd know about it, because there are people out there that are digging so hard for this stuff that it would definitely be on the front page of the Daily Mail if anything like that had happened. We can almost guarantee
But there is actually. So there are a couple of studies that have been done with parents and young people who attended the Tavistock. But what the newspapers want to sell you is this story that kids are being fast-tracked. They've been given drugs within 5 minutes of getting there. They're being trans. That basically they've been put down a route that makes them trans at the end of it. They're not allowed. They're basically being fast-tracked down down a route that means that they can't change their minds, etc. The truth of the matter is that actually it's the opposite. There's studies that show that actually the way that children and young people were treated within the Tavistock was very much about prove you're trans. How trans are you? Trans girls told that they weren't wearing the right, they turned up in jeans and they were told off because, you're not trying hard enough.
Oh dear.
There was some and some really disturbing stuff in terms of these two studies by Cal Horton. So if anybody wants to look them up.
Yeah, I will.
And I remember, because I went to the Tavistock with my daughter, and I remember that some of the things that were said to me, like, for example, one of the first appointments that we went into where we're talking, and they're like, what was your pregnancy and your birth like, her birth like? And I'm like, what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, one of my... got to do with anything. It was about trying to find a reason for them being trans. It was based on the fact that the Tavistock was based on psychotherapy.
Yes, yeah, because I remember when I first came, tried to speak to my mum about my my feelings about being trans or whatever, there wasn't much language I could use. I was like 16, 17. And my mum just said, I'll take you to the doctor. So it's like, you go see your GP, and the GP doesn't know. And I was taken to a child psychiatrist. There wasn't a gender clinic. This was like 20, 25 years ago. And it was like, I'm made to sit in front of it. It felt like I was on trial, you know what I mean? So when people complain about the way services are, it's usually because of that. It's not because of like what you were saying. It's that the complaints are there because our needs are not being met properly. Like the problems I have with the gender care I get now. It's rubbish. You know, if you believe the papers, it's like you think there's a gender clinic on every street corner. Well, people are waiting 5, 6, 7 years just to get an appointment with a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And that's the reality. And I think people that are against us, they just think that it's a case of knocking on the GP's door, and the next minute, you know, you're going through gender reassignment surgery. I mean, I kind of wish it was like that.
Can I absolutely assure you it's not.
No, definitely not.
So then we have,
children's services as well. So sorry, go on.
Yeah. Then we've got Miriam Cates, MP.
Oh, that little horror.
Using Prime Minister's questions time to, ask for a police investigation into mermaids. I'm not sure how you responded to that, but I think it was along the lines of,
"Hi, this is
here we go again." She's criticised us before,
And the thing is that it's not a police matter. In terms of what we do as a support charity, how on earth can that be a police matter? It was just negative publicity. Negative publicity. It's a publicity stunt to try and discredit the charity, to try and raise questions about the charity, and this is all aimed at stopping people getting help. That's what it is.
This is another incident around the same time frame.
Well, Vic, I was going to say
at the end of those other incidents, and it's all too manufactured for me. You can see, you can almost taste the connections.
Definitely. I mean, Miriam Cates to me is basically just Caroline Farrow with a bigger budget. And like when I listened to her in the House of, the parliamentary discussion about the meaning of sex, gender, whatever this thing that Sex Matters have created out of nowhere. She's like an evangelical. It reminds me of the Westboro Baptist Church. She'd be there with a placard saying, trans are going to hell. That's what I see when I see her. I see the pitchforks.
She was very much like that in that debate, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's leave mermaids there. Let's move on to GenderGP.
Yes. So we're going to the next phase.
So could you talk about how you became involved with GenderGP? Because that's a service that I've used. When I first came out, it was one of the only ones available in the private sector, which I could afford because it was, the least expensive out of, I think there was 3 choices, and it seemed to be the least expensive and the most accessible. I had a lot of friends who would kind of recommended it because they'd used it too. And it was really good. I mean, it started off, as quite a small thing. And they were, I was with them, I think it was from about mid 2018, somewhere around there, until I'd moved over to Indigo, which we'll come to later. But during the initial period with Mermaids, it was great. And then sorry, not Mermaids, GenderGP. I got Mermaids on the brain now. I was with GenderGP in those initial stages. It was really good. And then I think as GenderGP tried to expand, they kind of ran into a few problems with, new IT systems. And we went through a bit of a period where people weren't getting emails and the communications weren't great. And I remember having a chat with Helen Webley about that. And she was really apologetic. And they did fix it. It got fixed. And they kind of redid the whole system. And I think they had to move out to the UK because they were getting a lot of negative attention.
Same thing again, yeah.
Same thing again. They had to move the business out of the UK into Spain.
Some people out there that are very frightened of us.
It kept going, and I'm no longer with them because I'd moved on to NHS and Indigo. But it was something that had I not been able to get that, I would have been years behind where I am today. So I know it's private, I know it's not the NHS, but I'll give it my full support just because of the way it helps people like me, not others. I don't know if you ever used it, Frida, but I found it to be, really useful thing to have.
No, I've not used GenderGP. I just went straight from, I was buying just from a private hormones from a private company, and I shouldn't have been doing that really because I wasn't getting blood tests and stuff. I was just, but
you're DIYing.
I was, yeah, and it was making me all kind of stressed and stuff. So I got on with Indigo. That was about 3 years ago now. So yeah.
Yeah.
Been good. Been good. It's been, see, that stuff like my criticisms of everything. It's just not enough resources. It's not people I'm criticizing. It's like I sometimes have a mouth off at Vicky and go, "Oh my God, they're not replying to me again. They've not replied to my email."
Like those people, they haven't answered my calls. It's like,
yeah. But
yeah, I mean, it can be frustrating because I didn't go straight into Indigo. I first of all, went to my GP and I got referred, and I was waiting for Sheffield. I was waiting for Sheffield for like almost 2.5 years. And then I was approached by Indigo because I was on Sheffield's list and I hadn't been seen. And I was one of the early group that went into Indigo, and it was kind of an option as to go in or not. And I was like, should I go for this or not?
It was a pilot service, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was really worried about going into it because it was a pilot service. Nobody knew anything about it. But I agreed to do it. And it turned out to be great for me because I was right at the beginning and I got through quite quickly.
So your question
was a bit different,
So I met Helen Webberley, I think in like 2015, I think it was. And she approached Mermaids and I met for a cup of coffee and we had a chat about she was providing adult trans healthcare and she wanted to provide for young people as well. And the reason that she wanted to do that was because even back then there were still issues around waiting lists and time to get into services, etc., within the GID service, the Gender Identity Service for Young People. And so she wanted to follow the W path, which is the international guidance, like literally the global guidance that most service specifications are built on. And she wanted to work and support kids. And so I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great because, the NHS, I think at that point, the NHS was still not providing blockers until 16. Yeah. They changed fairly shortly afterwards, and then they did, but it was based on age. So it was 12 years old. You had to be 12 before you could get blockers. Right. Now, then in 2016, the NHS moved to saying stage, not age. So they provided it at the Tanner stages of puberty, which was an improvement. But again, still, waiting lists, still taking a bit of time, but nothing compared to what they're like now.
Can I just ask you about blockers, just for people listening? It's like, because we get this a lot, that people say it's not reversible, it's got lasting damage, side effects, all this kind of stuff. Can you just give us some information on blockers and what they actually do? And obviously, just for people who don't quite know what that blocker means.
Okay, so blocking medication, it's a GnRHA analog. So basically what it is it's a medication. It started being used for prostate cancer because it shut down the production of hormones.
Right.
So, and then it started being used for what's called precocious puberty in
I've heard about
cisgender children. So that's been done, I think, since the 1970s or maybe the beginning of the 80s.
So this is not new medication?
No, it's not a new medication, not by a long shot. So what they used it for kids with precocious puberty is like your 4-year-old starting a periods, for example. So kids who go into puberty like way, way too early, and they just give this blocking medication, stops the production of their natal sex hormones, and then all they did was when they got to like a reasonable age, like 10 or 11, took away the blocking medication. And then within generally 3 to 6 months, but sometimes at the outside, it was a year, normal puberty resumed.
Yeah.
So the blockers wore off, normal puberty resumed. Kids then started going through, continuing on their pubertal pathway. And so we've got adults with kids and, this is used for thousands of people worldwide. It's been seen as being like the gold standard of treatment for precocious puberty. And it is reversible, because if not, then all of those cisgender kids who had blockers would not have continued on with their
Right.
natal, with
Right.
their natal puberty.
Exactly.
And if it made kids trans, which is the other thing that's said, all of those kids with precocious puberty would have decided they were trans, and that
Yeah,
didn't
they would
happen
have
either.
they would have had gender issues, wouldn't they? And we don't see that.
And we don't see that. That's just not happened.
And I think when talking about hormones, I think because a lot of things that comes up and when this irreversible thing is what they're actually talking about is side effects, and every medication has side effects. So if I was to look at a bottle of paracetamol now and was to show you the list of things that could, if you showed that to somebody, oh my God, I'd never take a paracetamol ever again. But because they have to list absolutely everything that could possibly in a million years go wrong, that's the kind of information that gets put out into the media about hormones and blockers, because there are side effects. But but I think that every medication does. So
there might be side effects, but I think when they're talking about irreversible, they're talking about surgeries, aren't they?
No. They're talking about the blockers, and they're talking about because to get surgeries, like I don't know in this country at the moment, if you're on, you'd have to go. I mean, I don't know what you'd have to do. Don't you have to get like 3 doctors' signatures and all that kind of thing? So
depends what type. Depends what type of surgery. But essentially, blocking medication, hormone blockers, GnRH analog, is completely reversible. You stop it and puberty resumes. That's it. But
it's even me at my age, like I when I had my breast surgery, the surgeon would not do it unless I had a letter from the gender clinic to say I am of sound mind. Like, I don't think I am a sound mind. But you know what I mean? It's like, how do you approve that to a doctor? Like, okay, I'll be as sensible as I can be for you. But it's like, even as an adult, that's how difficult it is. So my options were get it signed by the gender clinic or go abroad and do it. Now I know which is the safest option. So this is why people do go abroad and they do these things. It's because there's so much gatekeeping. It doesn't stop people being trans. It just makes it harder for them to get the treatment they want and can put them in danger. So
yeah, you moving to GenderGP, for me, that seems like a really good fit.
Yeah. So the reason, I mean, obviously, the work that Mermaids does is absolutely indisputably like life-saving. And, I've got a special place in my heart for mermaids and always will have. I think going to GenderGP, I had a long-term relationship. Like I knew Helen and I saw what she went through with when basically what I said to her when she started looking after, when she said she expanded into supporting children and young people, I told her they're going to come after you, the establishment, the GIDS services, they're going to come after you. The other, private healthcare providers who are also within the NHS, they're going to come after you because I'd seen it happen before. I saw it happen to Russell Reed and I saw it happen to Richard Curtis. They basically kept reporting them to the GMC and saying they weren't following protocol. They weren't doing this, they weren't doing that. And I said to Helen, expect that to happen. And she was like, well, I'm following WPATH guidance. I'm following the international, well-respected, understood to be like the gold standard. That's what I'm following. And I said, they're still going to do it. And they did.
Yeah.
So it started with adult GICs starting to basically make complaints about her to the GMC. There were a number, I mean, she's done like a thread on sort of like the timeline and who complained first, etc. But it
went on for ages.
It went on for ages. So so by the middle of 2019, or sort of like into 2018-19, so she ended up suspended, her license suspended by the GMC while they were investigating. Her husband then started supporting the families and young people that she was looking after and then couldn't. And they did the same to him. They reported him. And they managed to actually get him struck off. And I think at the time, Helen has said that they just didn't have the emotional resources or the financial resources to fight it when Mike was struck off. But then when they suspended her and then the tribunal case came to court and the medical tribunal said that she should have a 3-month suspension. Bearing in mind she'd been suspended this whole time as well, and she appealed it. So at the end of March this year, the medical tribunal heard all of the evidence and they basically overturned everything. And they said she is at the vanguard of healthcare trans healthcare.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with the treatment that she undertook, that she's got a GP special interest, and she undertook all of the training that she possibly could, bearing in mind there is no specific training for gender dysphoria, and you don't get anything in medical school. And so there is no
specialized thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not even specialized because they don't have any training. There is no training.
So there's nothing at all.
Nothing
so it's
at
based
all.
on experience and practice.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think WPATH are now introducing some training. So they're looking at introducing training, accreditation training, etc. But it's not, doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals do not have any training on gender dysphoria, either for trans adults or kids. Nothing. So, mental health professionals, they don't have any training. They don't know how to deal with it.
Well, so that's why I think we come under the umbrella as mental health. Like when we get to see a psychiatrist, it's like, well, I understand there's some issues I've got to talk through, and yes, therapy is always good, but it's not. It's like when it becomes this mental health thing, I think that's when ableism comes into it, and because I often get people on Twitter saying, "Oh, you need psychological help." I was like, well, yeah, actually, I actually could do with some of that. And I think you could too. And I think everybody in the world could do with a bit of psychological help. Thank you very much.
It's because it's come through a route of being it's like being gay was only removed from the International Catalogue of Diseases in I think it was in the 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was only it was removed as a mental health as a mental illness. And gender dysphoria or gender incongruence, which is now it used to be gender identity disorder, and now it's moved to gender incongruence. That's only just recently, over the last few years, been removed as a mental health illness. So that's why I think this pathway through mental health has been there, and the remnants of that are still with us today.
Oh yeah, because it's a stigma. I mean, like it's like if you've got anything on your medical record to do with mental health, some medical professionals treat you differently, and I've noticed that myself. My brother's schizophrenic, and when people say, "Oh, like if I tell them." They're nervous about meeting him. I said, no, you don't have to worry. He's just normal. He may exhibit some unusual behaviors, but he's a person, and you talk to him like anybody else. Yeah. Because there's these fear stories all the time about people stabbings who are schizophrenic, and it's always this negative thing. That we have this perception of people in society that when they have a mental illness or they're diagnosed psychologically, then they're a problem. It's like, no, we're not. And there's no such thing as a sane world, Helen Joyce. No matter how much you wish there were, there is no such thing as a sane world because your world is insane to begin with. So,
Susie,
sorry, I went off on a bit of a turfy tangent.
A bit of a rabbit hole. So, Susie, what is your role now at GenderGP?
So, just to give you a little bit of background. So obviously the news about me no longer being at Mermaids came out sort of like at the end of November. Helen was one of the first people to get in contact with me, and she was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, thank you. And she said to me, look, come and work here. She said, I know you've been battling with the fact that, Mermaids isn't allowed to talk about private healthcare, largely because of the GMC cases, and because Helen was suspended and Mike was struck off. We were told we couldn't refer to private healthcare, and there was no other source of private healthcare. So for kids, young people at all.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I couldn't talk about it. The only option left for kids was the NHS services, unless they decided to go private and go to GenderGP, which many did and are still doing. Mm-hmm. So Helen contacted me and said, look, come and work for me. You've got years of activism left. And you can actually move into a space where you can maybe have more of a direct life impact on some of these young people's lives. And
you'd gone through the same kind of attacks. The same kind of people were attacking you both. So you probably got a lot of strength from sharing each other's experiences.
So now you're in the private kind of sector. Do you feel as though you've been unshackled? You got more freedom to do what you need to do?
I can certainly see that. I mean, obviously, the charity world is you've got the charity commission
there's
that
lots of
they're
rules, isn't there?
overseeing. There's lots of rules, etc. So it is it's freer, and I can obviously but obviously one of the things that I've done since I came on board as community director, so a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is talking to the community and asking, how can GenderGP be better?
Yeah.
But one of the things, how better can we serve it? Can we look after you? What are things that would be good for you? Talking to families about how to appeal against when a GP refuses shared care, for example, because GenderGP doesn't make any cash per person from medication costs or from blood tests. We work with partners.
Yeah.
So those don't bring revenue into GenderGP at all, but they cost patients a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if a GP will support a person's healthcare by doing what's called shared care, so GenderGP undertake the blood test, analysing the blood tests, sort of saying, this is what needs to happen. This is what your dosage is. This is what your blood tests are showing us. That if the GP will do the blood test and then send the results to GenderGP, it costs the patient a stack of, it basically saves them a stack of money.
Yeah.
If they'll prescribe on the NHS what GenderGP tells them they need to prescribe, that saves another stack of money. Yeah. And then all you're then paying for through GenderGP is actually the cost of the subscription. And so that's like your support.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a gender clinic, and you, in a way, like, it's not just because I think there's this conception it's just a dispensary for tablet. You know what I mean? But it's a full service, and it's like with some real, hugely experienced therapists. Many of them have got lived experience. A clinical team. But yeah, I mean, obviously after the GMC went after Helen and Mike, they then moved offshore because having a UK-based company wasn't safe, and they wouldn't have been able to continue to help all of the people that we're currently helping. But yeah, I mean, it was very much a come and work for us, and I was a bit like, okay, well, let's see what this is like, and let's see what we can achieve. And one of the things that I did as soon as I sort of came on board is they created what's called the fund a couple of years ago when Kira Bell took the Tavistock to court and got that court order. They created the fund, as they called it, and that fund then supported young people to access private healthcare. After that went, and basically the NHS just stopped looking after trans kids. So, but it wasn't really set up right. It wasn't done in the right way. They didn't have the experience of running like a charitable sort of initiative. So that's what I've taken on when I've gone into GenderGP, is creating a fund, making sure that the mechanisms are in there so that it's transparent, that we can show where the money's going. But that fund just covers healthcare from GenderGP. So we opened it with the youth fund that gained about 40. We're on about 14,500 in the youth fund, and then we had a streamer, Finster. And they gave $50,000 Yeah, Finster's massive.
Yeah, to GenderGP, but that was like that's for adults, because what they said, and it's quite right, is that their content is very much of adult content. Yeah. So that 40 grand, what it equates to in like GB pounds, is held back just for trans adults of 18 and over. So, but I mean, it's still great, but there's still ongoing work that needs to happen to maintain that fund, to keep bringing money in, to ensure that when we get to so I budget for like a year's worth of care. So when they get to the end of that year, that they're not going to suddenly stop getting care. So fundraising and ongoing initiatives around how are we going to make this fundamentally something that we can continue to give. And also things like shared care. How do we get more GPs to do shared care so it costs the patient less, so then the fund doesn't have to cover as much money because the NHS services are picking it up.
That point you make about shared care and GPs, I mean, it's a very relevant point, because a lot of them don't want to do shared care plans with private sector companies like GenderGP. I know my original GP wouldn't do that, refused, said they want to wait until I'd got to the right stage with Sheffield at the time.
Well, I had a very
but then when
weird...
I changed to Indigo, things went through quickly, and I managed to get NHS. Everything
I had a very
Indigo and NHS, and then I
actually,
I left GenderGP's care at that point because didn't need any more help. But one of the other things that was problematic with GenderGP at the time was that when if you needed things like gender recognition certificate reports, medical reports, GenderGP weren't able to offer those at the time because they weren't on the official list. So there was difficulties around getting everything you needed from GenderGP. So there was some things you couldn't, although they were trying to resolve that, they didn't have, the people in place to do some of those things. I don't know what the situation is now, obviously, because I'm no longer a customer, client, patient, whatever you call this, at this stage. So has that now changed? Is that now something that you could get as a patient with GenderGP?
There's off the top of my head, I don't actually know whether you can get like GRC. I know that we do a lot of surgery.
So it was the medical reports that were.
I mean, we do a lot of surgery reports. So we'll do, so like you were saying, Frida, that you got like you needed we do a lot of those. And we've got very experienced, trained counsellors, as I say, with lived experience, etc. So it's not, it's not just a dispensary. That's not what GenderGP is. But I think obviously Helen's view is that we should be able to provide everything that that a trans person needs, a point of access into GenderGP. So she's constantly looking at ways to add to what we do, how we do it, what we can deliver. But I don't know specifically about the GRC. I'm not sure.
Reports where the person who's doing the report has to be
on a list,
on the GMC list. So it was very difficult for them to do that at the time because of the troubles that were going on.
You see, I had a really interesting one that. Sorry, I was going to say, because when I first went to my GP, obviously it's a bit of a complicated story with me, because when I was young, my mum tried to help me and I sort of detransitioned, and then it took me a long time to come back. So when I came to the doctor like 3 or 4 years ago, my doctor really wanted to help. Like she'd known me for quite a while. She knew I'd spoken to her, and she said, I can't do anything because I can't prescribe. I can't. You have to go through the gender clinic. Now, she would have wanted, if she could have assessed me, and because she's known me, she knows this is what I want. And I would think if the GPs could be have more information, that would be so much easier. Because like I feel like we have to go through so many hoops and jump over so many hurdles.
I think a GP can prescribe, but
they can.
But they're not confident enough because they've got no support. They don't know.
Initially, my
don't
GP
know anything about it. So
didn't have any. Like you were saying, they're not trained in gender dysphoria. And without a psychiatrist or a psychologist's report, they're very nervous, aren't they, to do anything like that?
It's because that the GMC will come after them legally.
Or maybe not now. After Helen's been vindicated, I think.
It's different now. Helen. Now Helen's been through that has changed a lot of that.
I think that what we need now is a few like brave GPs to put their heads above the parapets, because the chances of them being them being pursued by the GMC is like, obviously with Helen, literally the medical tribunal have said your thinking was flawed. We don't, she should never have had to go through this, and that she's been vindicated and her healthcare has been held up as like really progressive and, as I say, at the vanguard of. So you think about those kind of things and you think, hopefully somebody somewhere, it's like, I've got a special interest in this. I'm going to learn about this. I'm maybe going to do a WPATH course. I'm going to look at the endocrine guidelines. I'm going to look at the WPATH guidelines. I'm going to look at what needs to be done. I mean, GPs prescribe every day things that are 100 times more toxic than HRT. And they'll give HRT to people who come through the door without hesitation.
Exactly.
But they won't prescribe exactly the same thing just because it's a trans person. And I think, you've got to look at the reasoning behind that. And a lot of that is fear of persecution.
And
the media.
And it's the mental health stigma.
And the mental health stigma. But I mean, gender dysphoria, gender incongruence is not a mental health issue.
Exactly. You know, and
It's not.
that point I made about medical reports, you know, that like GenderGP was having trouble doing that. I mean, that's no different for Indigo. Indigo can't do it either, you know, and they're an NHS organisation. Well, they're a private organisation, but they've been, you know,
It's outsourced.
given the outsourced by the NHS, so they can't do it either. They have to refer it off to, I think it's Nottingham GIC, which is their kind of parent GIC. So you know, it's not just GenderGP that can't do that. You know, somewhere like Indigo can't either, which is shocking, really, when you think about it.
But it does all these things. They never reduce the amount of trans people that need help. It's like it's that's rising, because I think it might be there's more social acceptance. There's children, like young people are able to communicate more easily. Like when I was younger, you know, it was like the internet was fairly new, and it wasn't like everybody's connected on TikTok and everything like they are now. So I think what it is younger people are seeing people living happy lives who just happen to be trans. And that is the most positive thing, isn't it? Because for us, we're entrenched in these things like the GRA reform, self-ID, whatever bloody Graham Linehan's up to. But for young people, they don't. But sometimes even when I talk to my sister and I try and explain, she goes, "Oh, but don't leave that alone. Nobody leave those lunatics." Because we're sort of entrenched in it all the time, we feel like this is the world, but it's not. It's a tiny minority of people that have managed to get a lot of media power, and I think that's the perception of trans people. But like you say, like there's more people coming out. That's not there. It's not working, is it? It's not working out for them.
It's still not working. There's still not the capacity in the NHS to deal with it. I mean, they've introduced these new pilot schemes. I think there's 4 or 5 of them now. And you know, we've heard all these talking about the new regional centres to replace the Tavistock kids. I mean, what's your view on those two things, Susie?
So it's been not to be too, like, it's been an absolute shit show. So they gave notice of closure to GIDS, and they gave it to them like literally the day before they went public with it. So literally they had no notice. They served them with notice of closure, and they were meant to close within a few months. They're still open, and they're still going to be open for a while. They talked about these new regional hubs.
Yeah.
Again, when? I mean, you know, we're hoping that we might see the first one towards the end of this year and then the second at the beginning of next year. But they said they'd be up and running by spring 2023.
No. Well, everything in the NHS.
And now they're also talking about changing the way that they, you know, do the prescribing. It's on you have to be part of a
clinical trial. The new service specifications that they have brought out that sort of supersede the 2016 service specification that was entirely based on evidence, that replaced age with stage of puberty, etc., introduced blockers at Tanner stage 2 to 3. They've just completely reversed all of that, and they've gone into you're not going to get blockers unless you're part of a research study, which is highly unethical, because it basically is forcing people into that study if they want care. They have said that, you know, if you go private, then you might end up being referred to social services. I mean, I don't know how social services think they're going to deal with that, and you know, social workers are like, why on earth would they refer us? Why? You know, the ability to go private is basically enshrined in the NHS principles. But why? And again, it's different, but it's only different for trans people. They're talking about social transition. So literally somebody changing their hair, changing their gender expression, maybe using different pronouns, and maybe changing their name. They're talking about that not being a neutral act, and sort of implying that it could be dangerous.
Yeah,
exactly. And how are you going to police what a young person wears?
Yeah, exactly.
How they style their hair, whether they grow it or whether they cut it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like we're getting back into Gilead. You know, we're looking at kids and going, right, okay, you can't look like that.
Yeah.
Because you're not allowed to socially transition. And now we're seeing school guidance leaked in the Sun a couple of days ago, where they're saying
Sunak.
Saying that you can't, once again,
all these things are connected in my mind.
All connected. And again, like this politics of distraction, you know.
The interesting,
it's terrible.
The interesting thing to me about that story, that's like, you know, about the it's this guidance, you know. So it's like, could it not be that children just ask questions? And when children ask questions, you've got to have good answers. And it's not teachers forcing anything on kids, because you can't make somebody trans, no matter how much these people think you can. So the children are already asking the question. They're bringing it to the classroom. They'll say, Miss, I've heard about you can be 1,200 genders. So if the teacher doesn't know how to have that conversation, then maybe that's why the guidance sex should exist. It shouldn't be to stop people expressing themselves. It should be to encourage that. Because if you stop it, you shame people. You make people feel shame. And this this story that came into the press about these two schoolgirls bullying a child, because when the government becomes the bully, what authority do teachers have to stamp out bullying? And then it has a knock-on effect on the children, because they can be emboldened if they have parents that believe things in the Daily Mail. And then we had I mean, I know it's an extreme example, but what happened to Brianna Jai? That was a 16-year-old girl, and they were young people. They were school-age children that committed that atrocity. So don't tell me, Rishi Sunak, that what you say doesn't have any effect on, real people's lives, because it does. And this is why it gets me going, because when journalists write these stories, they filter down to people's homes. Those newspapers come into people's homes. It comes onto people's phones. And they start to think of trans people as a problem to be fixed. So school kids, if there's a trans kid, they go, oh, that's one of them trans who the government are trying to fix. And it's like, no, you've got to have positive role models. That's why we have you.
So, I mean, we've still got these three big issues, haven't we, to deal with? We've got the Scottish GRA reform, self-ID, which is still a massive issue, unresolved. We've got, the Equality Act definition of sex, the government's trying to change with the EHRC back and forthing. And we've got the other issue of
the Equality Act.
No, not the Equality Act. The conversion.
Oh, conversion, yeah.
Well, it's not therapy, is it? It's practices. Conversion.
We don't call it therapy now.
We don't call it therapy because it's not therapeutic. So, I mean, do you want to talk on those three issues, Susie? I know the very big issues. Should we start with the Scottish GRA reform? I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's the fact that our government
incited
Section 35 to stop it, I think is absolutely disgusting.
It is.
That was probably one of the most, they're saying, consulted upon pieces of legislation that the Scottish government have brought in ever. And for Westminster to block it, I think it's, again, 30p Lee was saying that, we're gonna do the next general election. We're gonna fight it on woke issues, and trans rights are going to be one of them. So they're literally saying we're going to use one of the most vulnerable populations who are subject to the most discrimination and prejudice, and we're going to leverage their pain and their suffering, and we're going to pick on them even more than we already have done, just so that we can divert from the fact that we're absolutely fucking shit.
Yes, exactly.
That's it.
Well said.
That's it.
Well said.
And it's just disgusting. And all of this stuff around, the EHRC, we've got
Ben Hunt's article. Yeah.
Kemi Badenoch talking to the EHRC, Baroness Faulkner, it just makes me feel sick. I mean, literally,
that organisation is corrupt now, and the way they try to play it in the press as poor Baroness Faulkner, she's getting
gosh,
we've seen all the stuff that's been going on in the HRC over the past.
Those people, just for the people on the podcast, those people are bought and paid for. They're not your friends, right? They're not people that are working for any human rights.
The EHRC is supposed to be an independent organisation that's been totally taken over completely by the Tories. That is totally wrong. It's
they had to get somebody from the UN to come over and intervene, didn't they? What was it called? Victor Borelos.
Victor Madrigal.
Victor.
And then he's basically come away from here and gone, wow.
Yeah.
No wonder the UK are falling down the index in terms of equality and human rights, and has come back with some really damning stuff around the EHRC is meant to protect people's rights, but instead, they're looking at rolling back trans rights, and this, what they're trying to do with this, this changing the definition of sex will affect everybody who's got a GRC as well as people who don't. so yeah, I think it's disgusting, and it's very cynical, and
But
it's
all
based.
the arguments of sex matters don't weigh up at all in a social reality, because all the arguments every single argument requires there to be a threat from somewhere, and the threat is trans people. And it doesn't matter. You can have all these arguments about sports and prisons and single sex spaces, and we're sure if you have an argument, you can find instances where we have to safeguard, and those things already exist. But you'd think, if you listen to any of these people, that trans women especially are just an imminent danger to society. That's the level of debate they have. So it's really hard to have, like, when I've been on sometimes TV debates with these people, on Talk TV or whatever, I'm not going to sit there in front of you and defend my identity. Do you know what I mean? You are absolutely abhorrent to me, but I've got to have these conversations with these kind of people, because because sometimes I'm the only trans voice in that space. And it's quite
important to be.
It's quite lonely.
It's important to have a trans voice in those spaces. As terrible as those spaces are, we do have to have representation.
But then again, the entertainment side of media now, it's like, it's not really about news anymore. It's about clickbait. It's about vexation. It's about creating, endless streams of headlines. People don't read the articles.
I'm convinced there's a trans version of Cambridge Analytica.
There is, yeah, there definitely
I'm convinced of it.
There's a machine.
I just don't know where it is. I think it's probably based inside Tufton Street.
There's a computer in Tufton Street that puts out tweets every day with the word transgender in.
So then, we've seen the government have I think once again kicked down the road the conversion practices ban. I'm not sure what's going on with that at the moment. I've not heard anything.
So it's gone into the Prime Minister. So apparently Rishi Sunak is looking at it at the moment. But unfortunately, one of the issues. Sorry, I'll just turn that off. Sorry, somebody's trying to phone me, and even though my phone's on silent, there we go, it's gone. Anyway,
it's okay.
Sorry. So it's gone into Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak is meant to be looking at, but they've put a clause in that basically says that if the person volunteers for it or says they want it, then conversion therapy can go ahead.
Yeah. So what's the point of that?
So what's the point? The point? Because if you're a kid and you're in a position where your family is saying you have to have this, then you're coerced into it, regardless of whether or but you'll agree to it because you don't want to let down your family, and you want to be, you want your family to love you and not reject you.
I mean, it's an interesting it's an interesting thing with trans and the idea of conversion things, because what it is to me, it's when you're not affirmed, when that is how it starts. Because like I trans people, I speak for myself, but when I noticed the way my sister's needs were met, it wasn't me wanting to wear a dress. It wasn't me wanting to wear makeup. I was like 5 or 6, but I noticed the way my sister's needs were met and what was affirmed about her identity and what was denied. And it is that is the, so when you talk about conversion, you don't even have to do anything really. It's just say deny boys a certain way of behaving, or you deny, and it's almost subconscious, because obviously parents want to know the sex of a baby before it's even born, so they'll start decorating their bedroom in a certain way. And it's like these things are sort of a subconscious thing, aren't they, with some parents? I think that they affirm feminine things in girls and masculine things in boys. And if you're trans, then you pick up on it very quickly, because you think, oh my God, I don't know, why is my dad suddenly trying to get me to be in military uniform and things like this, So you pick up on it. It's like, really, because that was like my dad. But you pick on it really quickly. And nobody can tell you what it is, that thing, because you have this idea, they'd like to say, oh, gender woo-woo. Yeah, gender woo-woo, let's call it that, because I'll tell you what, it's as real as anything else to me. And you don't have to be a psychiatrist, you don't have to be any kind of scientist. You just have, sometimes, if you can't explain something, because obviously, like, trans people have this problem of having to describe their own experience all the time, but you're not always an expert in your own condition. You can only read about why you feel a certain way. So sometimes this thing comes up about, oh, I feel like I'm trapped in the wrong body. That's a legitimate thing to feel. But because it becomes a bit of a cliche and people mock that, then maybe that's the only way that person knows how to
It's a
express
really
it.
simple way to explain it to
Yeah,
other
yeah,
people as
yeah.
well. It's a
And
really
that's fine.
simplified way to
No, if
explain
you,
it to other people, and that's fine. And if that's your truth and
yeah,
your
yeah,
reality, and that's what my daughter says,
yeah,
you know, she's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
you know, this is my body, but I've had to fix it to reflect who I am.
Yeah.
Well, see,
So
my take on that is that we're all born in the wrong body, and the fact that some people feel it more. Because obviously there's lots of medical problems people can have with the body. The body is always going to fail you, no matter how healthy you think you are. So the body is something we all like philosophically like try to escape from. And I think that's why a lot of people struggle, like a lot of girls especially struggle with physical thing when things about self-harming and things like that. And these all get thrown in by people that are anti-trans as a kind of weapon towards that. But actually, no, these are things that we need to talk about. And if you prevent people talking about them or you give them a sense of shame, they never will. They're never going to be able to. And it's the same thing with a trans person, with their body. Like I felt really conscious about my body and talking about it because it just felt icky. So,
So,
to
you
body
know,
positivity, that's what I'm
yeah,
spreading.
we're almost getting to the end of the session now. And I think, Susie, we've spoken about a lot of issues there. And I think a lot of trans people are feeling very much under the cosh at the moment with all what's going on. There's lots of terrible things on Twitter. There's, the government's against us, media's against us. It's difficult to find some positivity, apart from, when we're talking to people like you and Nancy the other day. And, I was down in Chippenham Pride and, I've met you down in Brighton Trans Pride last year. We were sat outside at some bar drinking some cheap two for one cocktails, I think it was, with Jason Potts. I mean, that was, those are the kind of joyous things that we can do. But, I wonder, we Frida and I, we're talking about activism quite a lot and what we can do and what's effective. And I think we kind of came to the conclusion that everybody should do what they're comfortable with. Some do more, some do less. Some do what they feel they can do based on their
I was going to say, Vicky, my activism is kind of like public speaking, and I do a bit of poetry and stuff
public
like that.
speaking. And she wants to buy a tank and go down to Tufton Street and spray rainbow water.
I'm performative. Like I come from my education is in art and performance, so I'm always thinking about this. But this brings me, when I said I donated some money to Mermaids.
Oh yeah.
Well, this came about because I was doing a show and I needed and I always wear something that's like a conversation piece, and I purchased a T-shirt from the Standing for X shop that said "woman." The one that says "woman." I've got it here actually. And I said, if for my payment for the gig, I will donate to Mermaids. And so if I can do it in this T-shirt, because obviously people associated don't want to be associated with that person, but because I'm reclaiming it, it says "woman" on it. I'm a woman, and I did this show, and people donated to Mermaids. So that's how it came about, anyway.
So yeah, I guess what I was leading to there before we went down
a bit of a tangent there,
a little tangent there. Do you have a message for the trans community? What would you say to us, at this kind of where we are today with all this mess going on? What would you say?
I think like just remember that these things go in cycles and it will get better. But I think the thing that I really like to say is to all of the cisgender people out there, allies are so important right now because trans people are just feeling so victimized, subjected to so much hate, and I think it's hard to keep your optimism going within this. So we need cis allies to stand up. We need the cis allies who are the parents that are the brothers, the sisters. We need them to stand up, because if they don't, the trans population is small and they're vulnerable. And we need to be standing up and basically standing up for people and going, this isn't right. And this is not about whether or not trans people should be trans, but just be a decent fucking human being, for God's sake.
Exactly. It's about empathy, and some people just lack it, like that empathy. And
I think most trans people I know are feeling pretty exhausted and worn out with it all, so it's
exactly.
You see, the problem with me is I'm kind of analytical, and I like watching parliamentary debates, and I like breaking them down into points and working out the argument. And I get to a point where I think, gosh, I have no life.
Yeah.
You need to take breaks, Frida. You need to take breaks. Absolutely.
I've got people helping me right now. I've got my friend Siosa. She helps. So a bit of a shout out to her for helping me. But yes.
So yeah.
And I think just reach out to each other, you know?
Yeah.
Reach out to each other, talk to each other, support each other. And I mean that obviously I'm part of lots of online groups that have like parents, carers, etc. And I do a lot of sort of support within those environments, talking to other people, acknowledging the fact that this is, this is just part of being human. Being trans is just part of being human, in much the same way as you've got blue eyes or brown eyes. This is just part of the natural makeup of people. And to stop, in terms of, as I say, cis allies need to stand up. Trans people, please take note that this will not be forever. And if we get them fuckers out of fucking number 10,
that's the first priority.
And we get in a more progressive government who will stand. I mean, I'm a little bit bit worried about what's coming, but I think it can't be as bad as what we've got.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a lot of this rot set in with the Brexit because they had to bring people on board that they probably would not have had to, and it's like the DUP and all those kind of.
Well, I mean, the Tories have made an absolute mess of the past 3-4 years, haven't they? Going back, starting with Brexit and all the other shit that's happened.
And
it's about time it all ended. I don't think we need to get into a Brexit discussion, but it's time to get rid of the Tories. That's what we need to do. So
yeah, absolutely, get rid of the
Tories. Interestingly, I when I've written to politicians, one of the ones that wrote back to me most positively was Caroline Noakes.
She's great. She's probably the only great. I can forgive her for being a Tory because she's great.
And she said, because what it was, I was explaining to her, because I'd seen her on the telly, and I just wanted to say thank you in a way, just thanks for standing for us, and because it's unusual for a Tory to do that. And I said I'd had a lot of trouble. I'd tried to speak out, and when I'd worked, because of my job, and people would try and get me in trouble and all this, and I said, she goes, because I know politicians get it all the time. It must be absolutely. I mean, for us, it's like on Twitter, it's bad enough. But if you're like a public figure like you, I consider you to be a public figure, and politicians, they must have to have a team around them to monitor all that stuff, because I couldn't, I've only stuck my neck out a little bit because I was on, I've been quite visible, but even that tiny bit of visibility, it made people really angry against me and twist my words and take me out of context and all that. It's terrible. And so to be on here with you, it's like, because we did have a discussion, didn't we, Vicky? So, oh gosh, we're going to get loads of negative comments, and how we're going to handle this.
I don't care about getting negative comments because we've had amazing guests on. I do not care about that.
No, I just say we do factor it in. We do factor it into our.
So, thank you so much, Susie, for coming on and doing this. It's been amazing.
Thank you, and it's lovely to speak to you.
That's not just a thank you for coming on and doing the podcast. It's also a thank you for all the amazing work you've done with Mermaids and are doing now, with GenderGP. So,
I'm not finished yet. No matter whether they were celebrating when after obviously the news of me no longer being at Mermaids hit, there were lots of celebrations from across the turfdom. But
well, they're just
here's the evidence. Susie Green is alive and well and fighting fit. So
they hate it when you succeed, and you succeed many times over. So they're just in their little pits in pain, and they're never going to change, I don't think. And we can only hope for the future. Do
you know something? There's still so much work to do around information, around combating the misinformation, the sort of like the deliberate lies that are told to sort of push this narrative of kids being forced down pathways. It's that it's so it's not the truth. The truth is actually very different, and we need to keep standing up for people's autonomy and the right for them to be themselves, and to not have to apologize for it either. Why the fuck should either of you or my kid or me as a parent have to apologize for the fact that she's not a cisgender person?
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you an interesting story. I've been trying to contact. I do a blog, and I've been writing, and I was thinking, how can I get my stories into more mainstream? And I've been writing about a journalist called Mick Wright, he writes for the Byline Times. I'm not sure if you've heard of Byline Times. And
I do. Yeah.
And he was writing something, and he picked up on something I'd written, and it was like, oh my God, a real journalist is interested in something I've written. And he said, and all he did, he tweeted something, and he got, because he's quite a well-known journalist, just for supporting me.
Massive pylon.
And Graham Linehan retweeted him, and I said, I'm so sorry, Mick. I said, no, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. And that's the kind of journalists we need.
Yeah, we need more people like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look at Kirsty Allsop.
Yeah,
she posted up and was like, actually, the fact that I'm getting so much hate shows me that I'm on the right track. And Graham Linehan, this is good though. Okay, so Graham Linehan posted up, oh my goodness, you need to look at Susie Green and the fact that she mutilated a 16-year-old son. And then my daughter then posted underneath, went, oh my God, really? That's wild.
That's it. So is Jackie on social media? Because I know I wanted to talk about her, but you're a very private family, obviously.
She is, and she's actually streaming. So she's on Twitch. So she's an Instagram, Jackie Pie Crust. So
well, I'm going to follow.
Go and have a look on Twitch. But Jackie Pie Crust. But she doesn't talk very much about trans issues, if at all. She did a little thing the other day where she got one of her younger brothers on, and they were looking at husbands for the pair of them, which was quite funny. But so she talks through, but she is thinking about doing some stuff around like her childhood, the sort of things that she experienced as an adult.
Yeah, because she can look back now.
Taking pictures like yesterday of hundreds of people just commenting on her private parts, and she's like, this is wild, Mum. I'm a fucking grown up now. Why are they obsessing about what's in my pants? I'm like,
I know, it's because
don't ask me. It's creepy as fuck. It's creepy as all fuck.
They're so sex obsessed, those people. It's like the always beware of Puritans pointing at witches, because they're the guilty. And when there's a moral panic, as there is, it is, because you've seen with Paris Lees today, all Paris Lees has done is announced that she's done, it's a wonderful thing. She's had a book turned into a TV drama. And somebody retweeted, but didn't she once say that she used to like getting random sex? And they're like, oh, right, so you're gonna punish a woman for liking sex now, are you? And it's like,
they will use absolutely anything they can against us. I mean, that's how they operate.
So you're not allowed to be.
If you're vulnerable, do not go on social media, and Twitter, stay away from it.
Twitter is a hell. It's a hell.
Yeah. Whereas me, I don't give a shit what they say. They can say what they like about me. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing is important to so many people.
That's a brilliant note to.
So we have a little tradition at the end of the podcast where we have to sing a little song, and it's very simple. And
we never get it right. We haven't got it right yet.
It's only a few words. It's don't forget to subscribe. That's all you have to do.
And the joke is,
are you prepared to join in with us? It's like
I can join in.
Okay,
you might regret asking me.
Reader's going to give us a demonstration.
Yeah, I've got to say, Nancy Kelly did the best one we've ever done. So you've got a. So
I've got a bar.
They've all been quite high. But to be fair, they've all been rubbish. So it goes, don't forget to subscribe. So I'll count us in. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Don't forget to subscribe. Oh my gosh, that was brilliant. I think we nearly topped.
It's just the harmonies going.
I think it's you, Vicky, that can't do it. I think it's...
Yeah, it's probably I'm not very good at
Right. Okay, well, it was lovely. And thank you for taking this time, because I know you're super busy and you've got so much on your plate. And thanks for talking.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure and great.
Thanks for talking, because you've opened my eyes to a lot of the work.
Yeah, there's a lot of really useful.
And so thank you. And I think
If you want to come back on, let us know. No problem.
Well, just ask me. I'm fine to talk about anything. So,
Okay.
and I think now it's wine o'clock.
I think what we should do, we should get you and Nancy on at the same time and see what we can do.
Yeah, Nancy's great.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I shall sign us off there. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye for now.